Petra is this magnificent carved structure about 140 feet high. And it was carved, it was hewn directly out of the rock. And that's the beginning.
Petra rises from the Jordanian desert like a miracle carved in stone. But what if everything we know about it is wrong? Long celebrated as a masterpiece of ancient engineering, this opulent Nabataean city once flaunted cascading fountains, hidden pools, and monuments carved taller than a 10-story building, without scaffolding, without blueprints, without ever stepping back to see the work. But Petra is not the beginning of the story. It may be the end. When a drone equipped with 100 times deep penetration radar scanned Petra's oldest structure, scientists froze. Beneath flawless symmetry, earthquake-proof geometry, and acoustics rivaling modern concert halls, the radar revealed unnatural voids, buried layers, and precision patterns that should not exist in solid rock. No inscriptions, no tools, no rubble, just impossible design, hidden deeper than anyone had ever looked. Before we reveal what the scan detected next, give this video a like and subscribe. Discoveries like this don't stay hidden for long. The impossible precision. When engineers first scanned Petra's treasury using high-resolution photogrammetry in 2023, they expected to confirm what textbooks had been repeating for decades, that the Nabataeans carved a beautiful monument using basic subtraction techniques. Instead, the scans returned measurements that made several researchers assume the software was malfunctioning. The facade, stretching 25 meters across and rising 39 meters high, is symmetrical to within 20 millimeters, a degree of precision normally achieved with laser-guided modeling or industrial stone milling machines. But this was carved 2,000 years ago by artisans standing on cliff edges, cutting downward into sandstone with tools believed to be bronze. Dr. Judith Mackenzie from Oxford wrote that the only way such harmony can exist is if the builders understood mathematical relationships like the 3:2 ratio and the golden ratio before carving even began, meaning they had a detailed plan for every centimeter they removed. But here is the paradox that grips every archaeologist who has visited the site. When you carve from the top down, you cannot step back to check your work. There is no vantage point inside the narrow, sick canyon that allows you to see the full facade. Modern architects rely on drones, three-dimensional imaging, and digital modeling to maintain proportional accuracy on tall structures. The Nabataeans supposedly performed the same feat without even the ability to view the structure in its entirety. One of the strangest discoveries came when tool marks were catalogued by Jordanian archaeologists. Every chisel strike appears almost identical in depth and angle, as if executed by a precision mechanism rather than human hands. Stonework experts note that fatigue alone should cause variation. After 1 hour of overhead carving, a modern carver's hand naturally shifts angle, pressure, and rhythm. Yet Petra shows no such human wobble. Some theorists argue that the Nabataeans may have used early geometric projection methods similar to those later documented in Roman engineering manuals, but there is zero evidence the technique existed in this region. Others suggest they could have used an unknown type of stone, stabilizing template, or wooden negative mold, but no remnants have been found. What is certain is this: 8,500 cubic meters of sandstone were removed with a consistency that, according to Italian master stone carvers who examined the facade in person, should not be possible without modern machinery. And that statement is what ignites the deeper mystery of Petra. When we know that Petra's precision is impossible, we need to explore the acoustic mystery that defies explanation, the acoustic anomaly no one can explain. There's a phenomenon inside Petra that archaeologists rarely discuss, and tourists usually stumble upon by accident. It happens when you enter the chamber behind the treasury, or stand at key points within the carved tombs and monuments. You speak, and the sound does not echo. It doesn't bounce. It lingers, suspended, amplified, almost vibrating, before vanishing with unnatural clarity. Acoustic engineers who studied the Alcazne and the so-called monastery in 2019 found that the internal chambers have resonance profiles similar to those of purpose-built auditoriums, except these chambers were not built. They were subtracted, carved from solid stone. The implications of this are enormous because creating acoustics like this is not accidental. It requires precise control over chamber volume, wall angle, surface texture, and material density, and these parameters must be calculated before any carving begins. In Roman amphitheaters, engineers used sloped seating, parabolic walls, and trial-and-error designs to perfect sound. But at Petra, the builders achieved that same auditory effect by removing matter, not adding it. There are no inscriptions explaining how or why, but researchers from the University of Amman and MIT, who analyzed sonic frequency responses in 2021, came to a chilling conclusion. Petra's builders intentionally tuned the stone using a technology now lost. They appear to have manipulated acoustic harmonics to guide the way sound moves inside stone, possibly to enhance ceremonial chanting, public speech, or ritual experiences. The best-known example is in the urn tomb. If you whisper near the rear wall, your voice is heard amplified and clearly across the entire front portico, a feature not even visible from outside. But how did they predict these effects without seeing the whole? Some theorists suggest they may have used vibrating plates or rudimentary resonance tests like the Chladni technique, where sand scattered on vibrating surfaces reveals frequency patterns. But there's no evidence these methods existed in the region at the time. And even if they did, that wouldn't explain how the design was translated into subtractive rock carving without error. Now that we've seen the acoustic anomalies, we need to examine the water systems Petra shouldn't have had. The advanced water engineering Petra shouldn't have had. Long before you reach the grandeur of Petra's treasury, you pass something few notice: small stone channels carved into the cliffside, running parallel to the thick canyon walls. At first glance, they look like natural grooves, but they're not. They're part of one of the most sophisticated water control systems in the ancient world, engineered to perfection, yet vastly under-advertised. Petra receives less than 4 inches of rain per year and sits in an environment so arid it should not support a thriving population, let alone a metropolis filled with gardens, fountains, pools, and ceremonial washings. Yet in its prime, Petra not only supported tens of thousands of residents, but exported water to outlying settlements. How? In 2015, hydrologists from King's College London published a groundbreaking report after mapping Petra's subterranean and cliffside water systems using ground-penetrating radar and infrared satellite scans. What they found shocked them: an extensive network of hidden cisterns, ceramic pipelines, pressure control chambers, and hydraulic regulators carved with such precision they could maintain constant flow rates over miles of uneven terrain. Even more remarkable, the channels were coated in waterproof plaster and included silt traps to prevent clogging. Technology not expected in that region until at least 1,000 years later. One main aqueduct, carved into vertical sandstone cliffs, dropped only 30 meters over a 7-kilometer run, keeping water moving without stagnation or overflow. That level of gradient control requires modern surveying tools. The Nabataeans had none, or so we thought. But here's where the mystery deepens. Some segments of Petra's aqueduct system cut through solid bedrock at angles and routes that suggest pre-existing knowledge of subsurface geology. There are no false tunnels, no test bores. Every cut connects. It's as if the planners already knew where the faults, soft layers, and water-bearing seams were located without seismic tools. Some now propose they had inherited or preserved geo-intuitive techniques, possibly oral traditions or forgotten instruments for hearing or reading stone. Strangely, as in the case of the treasury, the Nabataeans left no records explaining how this entire system was designed. Understanding the water engineering leads us to another puzzle: how Petra survived earthquakes that should have destroyed it. Why Petra survived earthquakes that should have destroyed it? Petra sits in one of the most seismically active regions of the Middle East. The Dead Sea Transform Fault runs less than 60 kilometers away, and historical records confirm at least 5 major earthquakes struck the region between the 1st and 8th centuries. In theory, Petra's monuments should be rubble. Vertical facades carved from brittle sandstone are especially vulnerable to seismic shear, yet the treasury, the monastery, and dozens of towering tombs remain standing, while later built Roman additions collapsed. In 2014, a joint seismic study by Jordan's Department of Antiquities and researchers from ETH Zurich examined fracture propagation across Petra's monuments. What they found was unexpected. Stress cracks stop abruptly at specific carved transitions. Rather than continuing through the structure as physics predicts, these stress breaks act like shock absorbers, dissipating seismic energy instead of amplifying it. Modern earthquake-resistant buildings use expansion joints, flexible layers, and engineered weak points to prevent catastrophic failure. Petra appears to have these features, but carved directly into solid rock. Certain columns are not fully attached to the cliff face. Some cornices float millimeters away from the rear wall. These are not errors. They are intentional separations that allow micro-movement during ground motion. Even more intriguing, the vertical fluting on columns and recessed reliefs increases surface area, subtly reducing resonance during shaking. Seismologists describe this as passive vibration dampening, a concept formerly studied only in the 20th century. The most astonishing detail lies beneath the ground. Ground-penetrating radar scans reveal that several major facades are backed by relief chambers, empty spaces carved behind the visible surface. Excavation is inherently destructive. This is a way to get a look at what's down there in the same way you would go in for an X-ray, perhaps before you went in for a surgery. These voids reduce mass and lower the structure's seismic load, similar to hollow core construction used in modern skyscrapers. There is no decorative reason for these chambers. They serve no burial function. Their only clear benefit is structural resilience. Yet no ancient texts describe such a technique. Theories vary. Some researchers believe Petra's builders learned through generations of seismic trial and error, gradually refining techniques that worked. Others suggest the knowledge was inherited from an earlier culture already adapted to this fault zone. What complicates matters is that later Nabataean and Roman structures at Petra do not use these same features, and they failed. Columns toppled, walls cracked, roofs collapsed. The advanced seismic logic appears selectively applied, concentrated in the most precise monuments. Once again, the pattern repeats. The oldest, most sophisticated structures survive forces that destroy newer ones. Technology regresses instead of advancing. The vanishing stone. Where did 8,500 cubic meters of rock go? With all this advanced engineering, one question becomes unavoidable. Where did 8,500 cubic meters of rock disappear to? Most visitors to Petra never stop to ask this question. But once you do, it's impossible to ignore. Where did all the stone go? Just the treasury alone required the removal of roughly 8,500 cubic meters of solid sandstone. To put that in perspective, that's enough rock to fill 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Yet today, there's no massive spoil heap, no scattered rubble, no quarry dump nearby that matches the stone removed from the treasury. In ancient quarries around the world, from Egypt to Greece, huge piles of discarded stone still lie where workers left them, silent witnesses to centuries-old labor. Petra, however, is different. Its landscape is almost unnervingly clean. In 2020, a team led by geologist Dr. Lorenzo Zambelli of the University of Bologna tried to track down the missing stone. Using sediment analysis and aerial LiDAR mapping, they found several mounds east of the city, but none contained sandstone that matched the treasury's distinctive grain and color. This raises a troubling question. Was the stone deliberately removed and taken far from Petra? And if so, why? One idea is that the rock was reused elsewhere in the city. But the math doesn't work. The Nabataeans often built with carefully cut ashlar blocks or carved structures directly into cliffs. Petra was not a city of freestanding stone buildings like Rome. Another theory, first suggested in 2017 by French archaeologist Alain Chamoux, is that the debris was crushed to create hydraulic cement, possibly to seal cisterns, but there's no large-scale evidence of this material across the site. The puzzle gets stranger when you look at later structures in Petra. These later monuments clearly have piles of rubble and abandoned stone cuts, but the earliest and most refined monuments, like the treasury, the monastery, and certain royal tombs, are mysteriously free of debris. That's what baffles experts, Zambelli explained. The work was done, the rock was removed, but the waste material, it's just gone. Some believe this points to a level of planning and project management far beyond what we would expect for the time. Few facades in Petra, like the monastery and the treasury, are as grand, but these represent over 500 other facades in Petra. This style really became the standard for tomb facades, researchers note. Others suspect the stone removal and carving happened in carefully staged phases, perhaps over generations, and maybe even under the guidance of multiple civilizations. The missing stone raises another mystery: why Petra's inscriptions don't match its monuments. In most ancient civilizations, the bigger the building, the louder the story it tells. Egyptian temples are covered in hieroglyphs. Roman forums overflow with plaques, dates, and dedications. But at Petra, home to some of the largest rock-cut facades on Earth, there's a puzzling quiet. The Nabataeans were meticulous record keepers. They carved trade agreements, religious dedications, and even everyday notes onto tomb walls, altars, and drinking vessels. To date, over 4,000 Nabataean inscriptions have been catalogued throughout Petra. And yet, here's the mystery: none of them mention the treasury. Not a word about its construction, its patron, or its purpose. Silence. Dr. Laila Neme, an epigrapher with the French National Center for Scientific Research, spent more than a decade cataloguing Petra's inscriptions. Her findings were surprising. The most elaborate inscriptions, those bearing royal titles or temple dedications, were often found not on Petra's grandest monuments, but on smaller, simpler tombs. The largest, most iconic structures, the treasury, the monastery, the urn tomb, are almost completely mute. No dedicatory texts, no carved symbols marking gods, kings, or even the deceased. For buildings likely carved over decades, this absence is more than unusual. It's unprecedented. Two main theories attempt to explain the silence. The first suggests the Nabataeans deliberately left these monuments blank, possibly out of religious taboo, or because the structures served ceremonial purposes rather than representing individual ownership. The second theory is far more controversial. Perhaps these grand monuments predate the Nabataeans entirely, which would explain why no inscriptions were added by them. There is some evidence for this. Nabataean script appears overwhelmingly on the city's later, smaller monuments. These show less technical mastery and often feature crude, hastily carved inscriptions, suggesting a period of decline rather than innovation. Epigraphers have also noted that the treasury's architectural style includes motifs rarely seen elsewhere in Nabataean culture, such as Hellenistic flourishes and puzzling Assyrian design elements. These aren't the hallmarks of a nomadic merchant society just finding its footing. They hint at architectural knowledge that may have been inherited or transferred from earlier cultures. One final detail adds to the intrigue. In 2019, under ultraviolet light, archaeologists discovered faint tool markings beneath the treasury's polished surface, etchings made before the final smoothing. Some of these markings aren't Nabataean at all. Instead, they resemble Proto-Sinaitic characters, a writing system that predates the Nabataeans by over 1,000 years. This silence becomes even stranger when we examine the magnetic anomalies that shouldn't exist. In 2022, a team of geophysicists from the University of Jordan, working with Swiss researchers, carried out a magnetic survey of Petra's central monuments. Their mission was routine: map underground variations that might reveal hidden chambers or ancient pathways used by workers. But what they discovered was anything but ordinary. Several key sites, especially the treasury, the monastery, and the royal tombs, showed unusual magnetic anomalies. Compasses would visibly drift up to 6 degrees near certain carved niches, only to snap back to normal when moved just a few meters away. Initially, this was thought to be caused by natural iron oxide in the sandstone, but core samples taken from these spots revealed no significant concentrations of magnetic minerals. Chemically, the sandstone was identical to surrounding areas that showed no interference. The situation became even stranger. The anomalies were strongest near specific architectural features: columns, porticos, and carved recesses, not random sections of the cliffs. This ruled out natural magnetic variation and suggested some kind of human influence. So, what could explain it? One idea is that the Nabataeans, or whoever built Petra's earliest monuments, may have had knowledge of magnetism, or were somehow responding to natural geomagnetic flows. It sounds extraordinary, but there are historical precedents. Some ancient temples in India and Egypt are aligned with magnetic north rather than true north, and some even contain embedded lodestone fragments that create localized magnetic fields. Could Petra hide a similar secret? A more radical theory comes from geophysicist Dr. Mina Abdul-Razek. She proposes that the anomalies might not have been intentional at all. Instead, they could be residual effects. The rock may have been exposed to intense heat or electromagnetic energy in the distant past, leaving behind a distorted magnetic signature. This raises questions few archaeologists dare to explore. What kind of process could permanently alter the magnetic field of solid stone? And why are these distortions always located near Petra's most precise and mysterious structures? Adding another layer to the mystery, drone-mounted magnetometers have detected similar anomalies in unexcavated areas, beneath what may be unmapped chambers or collapsed buildings. Whatever is causing the distortion isn't limited to the visible monuments. It could lie hidden underground, waiting to be uncovered. The tools that never existed. These magnetic distortions point to a final piece of the puzzle, what they never left behind. For a civilization capable of carving entire cities from solid rock, one of the biggest mysteries at Petra isn't what was built, it's what was never found. Over more than a century of archaeological work, involving over 85 international missions, researchers have uncovered temples, tombs, hydraulic systems, and even unfinished chambers. But tools? Almost none. There are no confirmed caches of chisels, no fragments of scaffolding, no worn hammers, no construction debris that shows Nabataean tools in active use. The few implements found near work sites are either ceremonial or too crude to have produced the incredibly clean lines, sharp corners, and millimeter-perfect details of Petra's most famous structures. Most are made of bronze or iron, and simply don't match the precision marks visible on the treasury or the monastery. In 2021, a detailed materials survey by the German Archaeological Institute confirmed that the absence of tool debris at Petra's major monuments doesn't make sense. A site of this scale should have hundreds, if not thousands, of broken or discarded tools buried around the bases of its carved facades. But there are none. Compare this to Egypt, where abandoned quarries near Aswan are scattered with hammerstones and copper chisels, or to Greece, where stone blocks still carry marks from every stage of construction, often with the tools left nearby. At Petra, it's as if the tools were never left behind, or were removed with surgical precision. This has led to a controversial but increasingly discussed idea. Perhaps the carvers of Petra used a lost type of tool, made from materials that degrade quickly, or tools that were deliberately destroyed or taken away for reasons we don't understand. Some radical theorists go even further, suggesting that what we see as tool marks might not even be from tools at all, but the result of a process we no longer recognize, a method of shaping stone that leaves no traceable implements behind. What the 100 times radar actually revealed. And now, what the drone's 100 times deep penetration radar actually found beneath Petra's treasury. The scan revealed an unnatural voids carved with geometric precision, buried layers that form interconnected chambers beneath the monument, and patterns in the bedrock that suggest intentional design rather than natural formation. These hidden structures align perfectly with the surface features, the acoustic chambers, the earthquake-resistant separations, and the magnetic anomalies. Whatever technology created Petra's impossible precision didn't stop at the surface. It went deep into the rock, creating a three-dimensional architecture that connects everything we've discussed into one unified, unexplained system. Petra has always been a mystery wrapped in stone, but the drone's radar scan has revealed something far stranger than anyone imagined. What we thought was the achievement of a nomadic merchant culture now appears to be something else entirely. Perhaps the remnant of a lost civilization, perhaps inherited knowledge from a time before recorded history, or perhaps something we don't yet have the framework to understand. The impossible precision, the acoustic engineering, the earthquake resistance, the vanishing stone, the silent inscriptions, the magnetic anomalies, the missing tools. Every mystery we explored wasn't a separate puzzle. They were all clues pointing to what lies beneath. The treasury of Petra may not be a treasury at all. It may be a gateway, a marker, a key to an underground world that has been sealed for thousands of years. And now, for the first time in human history, we know it's there. The question is no longer, how did they build Petra? The question is, What were they building it for? And perhaps more importantly, what's still down there, waiting to be found? If this discovery has left you as stunned as it left the research team, hit that like button and subscribe, because when they finally open that sealed chamber 35 meters below the treasury, you'll want to be among the first to know what they find. The past isn't just buried at Petra. It's hidden in plain sight, carved into stone, waiting for someone to look deep enough to see it.